जय राधा माधव राधा माधव राधे।
जय राधा माधव राधा माधव राधे।
जय गौरनिताय 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 जय गौरनिताय।
जय गौरनिताय 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 जय गौरनिताय।
जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद।
जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद।
जय श्री श्री राधा माधवाष्ट सखी की जय, गौर निताय
जय
की जय, श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय।
जय।
ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय।
ओम
ओम
नमो
नमो
भगवते
भगवते वासुदेवाय।
वासुदेवाय।
ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय।
ओम
ओम
नमो
नमो भगवते
वासुदेवाय।
वासुदेवाय।
ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय।
ओम
ओम
नमो
नमो
भगवते
भगवते
वासुदेवाय।
वासुदेवाय।
We are reading from chapter 6, Dhyana Yoga, text 34. Chanchalam hi mana Krishna
चंचलं हि मनः कृष्ण
Pramathi balavadridam
प्रमाति बलवदृढम्
Tasyaham nigraham manye
तस्याहं निग्रहं मन्ये
Vayoriva sudushkaram.
वायोरिव
वायोरिवाशुदुष्करम्।
सुदुष्करम्।
Chanchalam hi mana Krishna
चञ्चलं
चञ्चलं हि मनः कृष्ण
Pramathi balavadridam
प्रमाति
बलवदृढम्।
बलवदृढम्।
Tasyaham nigraham manye
तस्याहं
तस्याहं निग्रहं मन्ये
Vayoriva sudushkaram.
वायोरिव
वायोरिवाशुदुष्करम्।
सुदुष्करम्।
Chanchalam hi mana Krishna
चञ्चलं
चञ्चलं
हि
हि
मनः
मनः
कृष्ण
कृष्ण
Pramathi balavadridam
प्रमाथि
प्रमाति
बलवदृढम्।
बलवदृढम्।
Tasyaham nigraham manye
तस्याहं
तस्याहं
निग्रहं
निग्रहं
मन्ये
मन्ये
Vayoriva sudushkaram.
वायोरिव
वायोरिवाशुदुष्करम्।
सुदुष्करम्।
Please chant.
चञ्चलं
चञ्चलं
हि
हि
मनः
मनः कृष्ण
कृष्ण
प्रमादी बलवदृढम्
प्रमाति
Pramati
बलवदृढम्।
balavadridam
तस्याहं निग्रहं मन्ये
तस्याहं
तस्याहं
निग्रहं
निग्रहं
मन्ये
मन्ये
वायोरिव सदुष्करम्
वायोरिव सुदुष्करम्।
वायोरिवाशुदुष्करम्।
चञ्चलं हि मनः कृष्ण
चञ्चलं हि मनः कृष्ण
Krishna
प्रमाति बलवदृढम्।
Pramati
प्रमाथि
balavadridam
बलवदृढम्।
तस्याहं निग्रहं मन्ये
तस्याहं
Tasyaham
निग्रहं
nigraham
मन्ये
manye
वायोरिव सुदुष्करम्।
Vayoriva
वायोरिवाशुदुष्करम्।
sudushkaram.
चञ्चलं हि मनः कृष्ण
Chanchalam
चञ्चलं हि
hi
मनः
mana
कृष्ण
Krishna
प्रमाथि बलवदृढम्।
प्रमाति
Pramati
बलवदृढम्।
balavadridam
तस्याहं निग्रहं मन्ये
तस्याहं
Tasyaham
निग्रहं
nigraham
मन्ये
वायोरिवाशुदुष्करम्।
वायोरिव
Vayoriva
सुदुष्करम्।
sudushkaram. Chanchalam
चञ्चलं
चञ्चलं
flickering.
फ्लिकरिङ्ग्।
flickering.
He
हि
He
certainly.
सर्टन्
certainly.
Manaha
मनः
Manaha
mind.
मैण्ड्
mind.
Krishna
कृष्ण
Krishna
O Krishna.
ओ
O
कृष्ण
Krishna.
Pramathi
प्रमाथि
Pramati
agitating.
एजिटेटिङ्ग्
agitating.
Balavat
बलवत्
Balavat
strong.
स्ट्राङ्ग्
strong.
Dridham
दृढम्
Dridam
obstinate.
ऑब्स्टिनेट्
obstinate.
Tasya
तस्य
Tasya
its
इट्स्
it's
aham
अहम्
aham
I
ऐ
I
nigraham
निग्रहं
nigraham
subduing.
सब्ड्यू
subduing.
Manye
मन्ये
Manye
think,
think,
vayo,
vayo,
of the wind,
of the wind,
iva,
iva,
like,
like,
sudushkaram,
sudushkaram,
difficult.
difficult.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. The mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong. O Krishna, and to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind. Does anyone want to read the purport?
I can read, Mataji.
Okay.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The mind is so strong and obstinate that it sometimes overcomes the intelligence, although the mind is supposed to be subservient to the intelligence. For a man in the practical world who has to fight so many opposing elements, it is certainly very difficult to control the mind. Artificially, one may establish a mental equilibrium toward both friend and enemy, but ultimately no worldly man can do so, for this is more difficult than controlling the raging wind. In the Vedic literature, Katha Upanishad 1.3.3-4, it is said, Atmanam Rathinam Vidhi Sariram Rathameva cha Buddhim tu Sarathim Vidhi Mana Pragraham Eva cha Indriyani Hayan Ahur Vishayamasteshu Gocharan Atmendriya Manoyuktam Bhoktetya Ahur Manishinaha. The individual is the passenger in the car of the material body, and the intelligence is the driver. Mind is the driving instrument, and the senses are the horses. The self is thus the enjoyer or sufferer in the association of the mind and senses. So it is understood by great thinkers. Intelligence is supposed to direct the mind, but the mind is so strong and obstinate that it often overcomes even one's own intelligence, as an acute infection may surpass the efficacy of medicine. Such a strong mind is supposed to be controlled by the practice of yoga, but such practice is never practical for a worldly person like Arjuna. And what can we say of modern man? The simile used here is appropriate. One cannot capture the blowing wind, and it is even more difficult to capture the turbulent mind. The easiest way to control the mind, as suggested by Lord Chaitanya, is chanting Hare Krishna, the great mantra of deliverance, in all humility. The method prescribed is Sa Vai Manah Krishna Padaravindayo. One must engage one's mind fully in Krishna. Only then will there remain no other engagements to agitate the mind.
Umagnanatimirandasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesh Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, Mataji.
Nishi Mataji. So all these verses that we are reading right now are about controlling the mind. And in this verse, Arjuna is telling Krishna that the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong. So this is what he thinks. He is much more advanced than what we are in terms of controlling the senses. And he is saying this. Arjuna is known for even practicing archery at night. Sometimes he doesn't even sleep. He is known as Gudakesha. His senses are completely controlled. But he is saying mind is very difficult to control. Let's see how. I just want to do one exercise with all of you, and you observe what the mind does in this exercise. Are you all ready for that?
Yes, Mataji.
Okay. So all of you close your eyes and don't think of red color. Okay, now we'll go through everybody and see what their mind actually did. What happened in your mind, Manishi Mataji?
It was focusing more on red, Mataji.
Is that the same for you, Geetamala Mataji?
Same thing, yes. Immediately it went to red. Like, don't think of red. Don't think of red.
Yes.
Maybe I should say that. Don't think of Krishna. Don't think of Krishna.
So this is how the mind is. It's completely like strong, very strong, and it just wants to do what it wants to do. It doesn't want to listen to us, It has to listen to the intelligence if we are all functioning properly. But because we are in so much ignorance, we are identifying so much with the material body, it's actually controlling the intelligence. Sometimes, when we observe how mind is functioning, even to observe that, it takes many years of chanting and practice, I guess. We don't even know how it's functioning before we become devotees. We just go with the senses mostly. Whatever the senses want, the mind will go with the senses. But if you start observing, later we will find that mind will decide on what it wants first, and then it uses the intelligence to rationalize the desire it has. Actually, the intelligence should tell, this is good for you, so you should think of this, you should do this, you should use the thinking, feeling, willing processes of the mind to do this. But it doesn't work that way. If it's not in control, it will be the opposite. Mind will first decide what it wants and then uses the intelligence to rationalize it. So that we need to change. So mind, the strength of mind in a wrong way is shown very vividly in the story of Ajamila. So Ajamila is... does anyone have a question? It was unmute the mic.
I'm so sorry, but I just wanted to say the other part of intelligence that rationalizes the things the mind says, I call it the syntelligence. Syntelligence.
Okay.
Thank
you. So in the story of Ajamila, Ajamila was a very nice Brahmana. And he used to go out every day to pick flowers for worshipping Krishna. And he did the same that one day when he went out and he saw this prostitute with a man. And after seeing that, he contemplated it. Generally, when we see such things, the immediate reaction should be to turn the head away. But he was intently looking at it, like you see in the picture. So that should be our reaction. Usually we avoid places where we see things that we shouldn't see. We don't go to bars, we don't go to nightclubs and all those things. Even strict Christians like Mormons in Idaho and Utah, there are a lot of Mormons. They never go to bars. Like even at work, if there is some farewell or something at a bar, they don't go. Of course, we don't go anywhere to restaurants also, but they also follow this principle of not going to places where mind can see all these things. Okay, this is Kali Yuga. Even if we avoid such places, things just come in front of our face, especially in India, all these big billboards showing everything, advertisements and then movie stars and movie advertisements. All those are just right in front of our eyes. So we just turn our head away. We don't just keep looking at it. If we keep looking at it, then the mind will contemplate on it. And then, like the verse says in 2nd chapter, dhyayato vishayan pumsah sangasteshu jayate. So we develop attachment for that, and then we desire it. And if the desire is not fulfilled, we'll get angry. The whole cycle happens. So Ajamila, he was looking so much and he was contemplating so much. And then he ended up bringing that prostitute as a maidservant into his own house. And eventually he gives up his own wife and his mother and father and gets married to this prostitute. And for her pleasure, he engages in many abominable activities like stealing and killing people, things like that. So he degraded himself so much because of the mind. Of course, eventually he'll realize at the time of his death, and then he's given another chance to rectify and then get purified. Ultimately, he goes back to Godhead. But this is a lesson for us to use the mind properly. Another example, a short story that is referred to many times is Brahmana and prostitute. So there used to live a Brahmana, and next to his house was a prostitute. So this Brahmana was a very strict follower, and he was always doing all his ritualistic activities very nicely. And then whenever he looked at this prostitute, he was disgusted. It's like, look at her, she's so abominable, and she continues to do her activities day after day. And eventually he hated her so much that he kept hating all the time. And then it so happened, some natural calamity or whatever, they both died at the same time. So Vishnu Dutas were coming, and Brahmana thought, okay, yeah, I'm going back to Godhead. I followed everything so nicely. But then they went to the next house, to the prostitute. And then the Yamadutas came to this Brahmana. So he was like, wait, I think you both got confused. You should go to the next house and Vishnu Dutas should come to my house. Then they said, no, because you contemplated on the prostitute life all your, lifetime. So that's what you'll get in your next life. And the prostitute looked at you and thought, how nice it would be if I can be pure, if I can have a pure life. Because she meditated on that life, she's going to get a pure life. And because you meditated on this life, you're going to go to hell. So this is the lesson. Whatever we contemplate on, that's what will become. So we need to be very cautious on the motivation behind our activities, whatever activities. External activities matter to control the mind, but we need to be very careful on what the motivation is, what the contemplation is in doing anything we do. Another example is also caterpillar and butterfly. Caterpillar keeps contemplating on butterfly and eventually it turns into a butterfly. So that's about verse 34. And Krishna gives an answer to Arjuna's conundrum in verse 35. He agrees, but then let's see what he says. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha
Shri Bhagavanuvacha
Asamshayam Mahabaho
Ashamshayam Mahabaho
Mano Durnigraham Chalam
Mano
Manodurnigraham Chalam
Abhyasena tu Kaunteya
Abhyasena tu kaunteya
Vairagyena cha Grihyate.
Vairagyena cha grahyate.
Please chant, devotees.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha
Shri Bhagavanuvacha
Asamshayam Mahabaho
Asamshayam
Mahabaho
Mano Durnigraham Chalam
Mano Durnigraham
Manodurnigraham
Chalam
Chalam
Abhyasena tu kaunteya
Abhyashena tu Kaunteya
Vairagyena cha grahyate.
Vairagyena cha
Vairagyena cha
Grihyate. Shri Bhagavanuvacha
Shri
Shri
Bhagavanuvacha
Bhagavanuvacha
Samshayam Mahabaho
Asamshayam Mahabaho
Mahabaho
Manodurnigraham Chalam
Mano Durnigraham Chalam
Abhyashena tu Kaunteya
Abhyasena tu
Abhyasena tu
kaunteya
Kaunteya
Vairagyena cha Grihyate.
Vairagyena cha
Vairagyena cha
grahyate.
Grihyate. Shri Bhagavanuvacha.
Shri
Shri
Bhagavanuvacha.
Bhagavanuvacha.
The personality of Godhead said,
The personality of Godhead said,
Asamshayam,
Ashamshayam,
Asamshayam,
undoubtedly,
undoubtedly,
Mahabaho,
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 O mighty armed one,
Almighty armed one,
Manaha,
Manaha,
the mind,
the mind,
Durnigraham,
Durnigraham,
difficult to curb,
difficult to curb,
Chalam,
Chalam,
flickering,
flickering,
Abhyasena,
Abhyasena,
by practice,
by practice,
to,
to,
but,
but,
Kaunteya,
Kaunteya,
O son of Kunti,
O son of Kunti,
Vairagyena,
Vairagyena,
by detachment,
by detachment,
Cha,
Cha,
also,
also,
Grihyate,
Grishyate,
can be so controlled.
can be so controlled.
Lord Sri Krishna said, O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment. Any volunteers for purport?
I can read.
Okay, Mataji.
The difficulty of controlling the obstinate mind, as expressed by Arjuna, is accepted by the personality of Godhead. But at the same time, he suggests that by practice and detachment, it is possible. What is that practice? In the present age, no one can observe the strict rules and regulations of placing oneself in a sacred place, focusing the mind on the supersoul, restraining the senses and mind, observing celibacy, remaining alone, etc. By the practice of Krishna consciousness, however, one engages in 9 types of devotional service to the Lord. The first and foremost of such devotional engagements is hearing about Krishna. This is a very powerful transcendental method for purging the mind of all misgivings. The more one hears about Krishna, the more one becomes enlightened and detached from everything that draws the mind away from Krishna. By detaching the mind from activities not devoted to the Lord, one can very easily learn Vairagya. Vairagya means detachment from matter and engagement of the mind and spirit. Impersonal spiritual detachment is more difficult than attaching the mind to the activities of Krishna. This is practical because by hearing about Krishna, one becomes automatically attached into the Supreme Spirit. The attachment is called Pareshanubhava, spiritual satisfaction. It is just like the feeling of satisfaction a hungry man has for every morsel of food he eats. The more one eats while hungry, the more one feels satisfaction and strength. Similarly, by discharge of devotional service, one feels transcendental satisfaction as the mind becomes detached from material objectives. It is something like curing a disease by expert treatment and appropriate diet. Hearing of the transcendental activities of Lord Krishna is therefore expert treatment for the mad mind, and eating the foodstuff offered to Krishna is the appropriate diet for the suffering patient. This treatment is the process of Krishna consciousness.
Very nice. So here, Krishna is agreeing with Arjuna. I agree, it is very difficult to curb this restless mind, but it is possible. If you practice and if you have detachment, then it is possible to control this obstinate mind. So what practice? What kind of practice? So the practice that is mentioned in this chapter earlier, obviously Arjuna just denounced it. He said it's not possible because it's very difficult to control the mind. So what else we should do to be able to come to this stage of controlling the mind? So Prabhupada here is saying in the process of Krishna consciousness, we have 9 types of devotional service to the Lord. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Pada Sevanam Archanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakhyam Atmanivedanam. So the beginning, the first and foremost of devotional engagements is hearing about Krishna. That's the beginning. When we hear about Krishna, then we would like to chant. Then when we hear some story, we would like to share it. We would like to explain others also about the glories of Krishna. And when we do both, then we can think of Krishna. It goes into Smaranam stage. And then there are other processes that we can engage in. Pada Sevanam, worshipping Krishna's lotus feet. Even serving Tulsi or serving devotees comes under Pada Sevanam. And then Archanam, deity worship. Deity worship is actually very important. When we serve the deities, then we get into this habit of thinking about the deities more than thinking about our own comfort, especially the deities in the temple. When we serve them, we keep thinking about what pleases them. What should we make so that Jagannath will be happy? What should we cook so that Jagannath will be happy? Radharani makes something different every time she makes. So we try to make some different things for the Lord. And for that, we use the mind in thinking about what can I make and how should I make so that the Lord will accept my offering. And then when we do the arati, we are looking at the beautiful face of the Lord. And then it takes us to a different level of absorption. It takes us to a different level of remembering the Lord. So deity worship is very important for that reason. And Archanam, Vandanam, offering obeisances. I think we all noticed it during COVID. Just 1 second, I need to put my charger. We all noticed during COVID when we couldn't do obeisances. It takes away part of our advancement, part of our meditation on the Lord. It's not the same as bowing down before the Lord. Krishna recommends this process even in Bhagavad Gita as one of the ways to go to him. So that's obeisances, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, serving him like a servant, and Sakhyam, being his friend. Book distribution is actually in Sakhyam because we are telling others about our friend. Atmanivedanam, surrendering everything to the Lord. Whatever we do, whatever we have, we surrender everything to the Lord. Those are the processes that will help us control the mind. And it began with hearing. And then the next thing Krishna talks about is vairagyana, detachment. So this vairagya is the weapon that cuts our material existence to the roots. So this detachment is very essential. Sometimes people say, okay, I'm doing everything, but I am also attached to this, this, and this. What's wrong with that? My father was arguing with me the other day that, yeah, there are all these people who are also devotees and they dress up so well, and why don't you? I didn't know what to tell, but this probably is the answer, that detachment is required to control the mind. If we are attached to worldly things, then the mind is taken away from Krishna. By detaching the mind from worldly activities, which are not devoted to the Lord, we can learn this vairagya. And this vairagya in turn helps us to control the mind. So there are so many things involved in controlling the mind. So Prabhupada, in one of his lectures, he says that controlling the mind means controlling the eating, controlling the sleeping, and controlling the behaving. So controlling the eating means both quantity and variety. As Nectar of Instruction says, Vacho Vegam, Jihva Vegam, Udara Vegam. So all these are related to controlling the tongue. And in that, eating part is both the quantity and the variety. So we should not eat food cooked by materialistic men. That's the first condition that we have. Of course, we don't eat meat, fish, or eggs, onions, and garlic. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he says in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Vishaira anna khaila malina hoy man. Malina mana hoyle nahi Krishnera smaran. So when one eats food offered by a materialistic man, one's mind becomes contaminated. And when the mind is contaminated, one is unable to think of Krishna properly. So in the purport, Prabhupada writes that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he suggests that if people are materially inclined, or even Sahajiyas, or even so-called Vaishnavas, who take everything very casually, not very serious Vaishnavas, are all materialists. So eating food offered by them causes contamination. So even serious devotees, if they start eating those food stuffs that they offer to us, we become materialistic. So these exchanges that Nectar of Instruction talks about, offering prasad and accepting prasad, offering charity, accepting charity, talking confidentially, inquiring confidentially, these can't be done with everybody. There are some things that we can only do with some people. So we need to understand where we can eat, whose food we can eat. We cannot eat the food of people who are materialistic in their thinking. So this association will enter into our heart and we become sense gratifiers. Like even if we are performing devotional service, it will become contaminated if we eat such food. That's what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says. And of course, about sleeping, Srila Prabhupada always says no more than 6 hours, still working on it. And behaving is mentioned in many places, how a sadhu should be and how a brahmana should be. So we need to work on developing devotee qualities, and that is about behaving. And then the next thing he says is fixing the mind on the lotus feet of Krishna. That's what will help the mind, because mind's business is to accept or reject. That is mind's business. So sometimes the mind thinks something is very good and it accepts it, But then after some time, it rejects it. That is the mind's business. Because, there are so many things that happen in the material world. What we consider as good at some time may not be good later, because everything is temporary in this material world. And or maybe we are so restless that we want something new all the time. So for the mind, the only way it can stay still is by focusing on the lotus feet of the Lord, because the lotus feet of the Lord are the reservoir of so much pleasure. By focusing on them, the mind doesn't seek anything else. It doesn't reject it. Once it accepts the lotus feet of the Lord, it will stay fixed. It doesn't reject. So that's why fixing the mind on the lotus feet of the Lord, Savaimana Krishna Padaravindayo, that is a way to go for controlling the mind. The next point that I wanted to mention is about Devahuti and Kapila. So Devahuti is the wife of Kardama Muni, and then after she gave birth to her daughters and her son, Lord Kapila, who is the Supreme Lord himself, Kardama takes sannyas and he leaves. That's when Devahuti realizes that she didn't get any spiritual association from Kardama Muni. She just wasted her life in all these things, material things, and didn't really learn much from Kardama Muni. So she approaches Kapila to teach her about spiritual science. So in that conversation, she says once that I'm sick of the disturbance caused by my material senses. And because of this sense disturbance, I'm in this ignorance. I'm in this deep, dark well of ignorance. So you are my only means for getting out of this ignorance, because you are my transcendental life. And because of your mercy, only I can come out of this. You are the Supreme Lord, and you have come to dissipate the darkness of ignorance. You are like the sun, and you can dissipate the darkness of this universe. So please help me. Please help me get out of this false ego. Please help me to not identify with this body and subsequently for these bodily relations. And I am taking shelter of your lotus feet because you are the only person from whom everyone should take shelter. And you are the axe that cuts the tree of material existence. So getting attached to Krishna or being detached to the material world is one and the same. It is referred to as the axe for cutting the material existence. One in Bhagavad Gita, in 15th chapter, it says that it is the axe, material detachment. And here Devahuti is saying getting attached to Lord Kapila is the axe. So after hearing his mother's plea and her uncontaminated desire to get transcendental realization, Kapila just smiles, and in his heart he thanks her for asking such a nice question, and then he answers. So the yoga system which relates to the Lord and the soul, individual soul, it is meant for the benefit of every living entity. And that is what causes detachment from all material happiness and all material distress. So this yoga system is the highest yoga system. And I'll explain you what it is. So in general, the living entity is attracted to modes of material nature. One of the modes or two of those modes, little percentage of each mode in each person, we are attached to those modes. And in that consciousness, we cannot be attached to the Supreme Lord. If we want to get attached to the Supreme Lord, we should be completely cleansed of lust and greed. They are produced from bodily identification. As long as we have it, that means we are identifying with the body. So only when we are out of this bodily identification of I and mine, our mind becomes purified, when we get rid of those identifications. In that pure stage, then one transcends the material distress and happiness. Mostly the mind, if we observe when we are chanting, it is sad for the distress that we might be going through, or maybe it's happy for what happened, or maybe it's making plans for material happiness. Mostly it's lamentation and hankering for the material distress or happiness. So when we overcome the feeling of I and mine, then we transcend this material happiness and distress. At that time, the spirit soul can see himself clearly, and he can see the Supreme Lord clearly, and he can understand what is the relationship between me and the Supreme Lord. So this position of self-realization will only be achieved by practice of knowledge and renunciation in devotional service. So at that time, one can see everything properly. Whatever is happening in this world, whatever is happening to us, whatever is happening to our family, we can see everything in proper perspective. And we can become indifferent to material existence. Doesn't mean one becomes very hard-hearted to others' problems. Doesn't mean one doesn't care to help others. But they don't identify with the material body. Whatever one needs in that situation, if a devotee is suffering, we obviously help. But we don't go into this moroseness that that's the end of life. Or we don't go into this deep sorrow which will bother us even when we are doing devotional activities. That's what is transcendence. Transcendence doesn't mean becoming hard-hearted. So another point Lord Kapila says is, there are many methods, there are many self-realization processes, like, Karma Yoga or Jnana Yoga, whatever it is. But no method will be completely perfect if there is no devotional service. Any process one may follow, if there is no devotion to the Lord involved in it, it will not be perfect. They will not reach their ultimate goal. So he again tells his mother that everybody knows that attachment to the material is the greatest entanglement for the spirit soul. But if the same attachment, if it is applied to self-realized devotees, then it opens the door for liberation. So we don't have to nullify that attachment, but we can put that attachment in a different place. We can get attached to the self-realized devotees. So that is the most important thing. We have seen so many of Srila Prabhupada's disciples. I often wonder, Prabhupada wasn't here for too long teaching everything. But how did they get so much detachment? How could they continue for many, many years in the same mood, even after he left? That's because they have changed their attachment to the material to attachment to Srila Prabhupada, who's a pure devotee. So it really helps if we get attached to a sadhu. And after that, Kapila explains what a sadhu is. What was that verse? Anyways, it is sadhu is somebody who's very tolerant, and he's merciful, he's friendly to all living entities, he has no enemies, he's peaceful, and he abides by the scriptures. And all of his characters are sublime. So such sadhu, he engages in devotional service all the time. So if we want to get attached to somebody, then we have to look for all these qualities. If a person is displaying all these qualities, then we can get attached to them. And that attachment will make us detached from the material world. You all probably noticed when you are in the association of some saintly people, the influence of modes of material nature is considerably less. Like you don't really worry about things that you usually worry about. It's like so much spiritual bliss that everything else is just put on the back burner. You don't really care so much about those. So this sadhu, he's staunchly engaged in devotional service without deviation. So he's constantly engaged in chanting and hearing, and they don't suffer from material miseries. They do not talk about material miseries. I heard this one Mataji who was about to pass away. She had cancer, but whoever comes, she never used to complain about her cancer. She always used to talk about Krishna. Although she herself was going through so much pain, her mind was not dwelling over that. That means she's not attached to the body. She doesn't think that she's the body. We can relate it to, some kids. If they are crying because something happened to their toy, how would we feel? We feel like it's just the toy. Don't worry about it. It's not you. Don't worry. So the same kind of feeling we will get when we understand that we are not this body, we are the spirit soul. It's the same kind of feeling. Doesn't mean nothing happened to the body. Body suffers, but you are separate from the body. You don't suffer when the body suffers. So this is the quality of a sadhu. So then he says, "Oh mother, these are the qualities of great devotees who are free from all attachment. And because they are free from all attachment, by us getting attached to them, we will also be free from all attachments." And real devotion and real devotional service begins from there. So by consciously being engaged in devotional service in the association of such devotees, then we develop distaste for sense gratification, both in this world and in the next. And we constantly think about the Lord. This process of Krishna consciousness. This is what the process of Krishna consciousness is. You get attached to a pure soul, a sadhu, and from then everything goes very smoothly. Like everything will happen eventually. As long as we are not attached, all these goals, all the the principles that are mentioned, they seem very difficult. They seem unaccomplishable. But if we get to that point of getting attached to a pure sadhu, then they become practical. We can realize them because of their mercy, because of their association, because of our attachment to them. So after this, again, Devahuti asks, what kind of devotional service is worth developing and practicing that can help me easily attain the lotus feet of the Lord? Because again, Lord Kapila mentions that if you want to control your mind, you have to focus on the lotus feet of the Lord. So she's asking what kind of devotional service will help me. And he says that the senses are the symbol of different demigods. And their natural inclination is to follow the Vedic injunctions. So mind is also the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the mind's natural duty is to serve. Who? The Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's when it is situated naturally. So bhakti, when we engage in this devotional service, it dissolves the subtle body. Gross body is dissolved when we leave, when we die. But how do we dissolve the subtle body? That is only through the process of devotional service. Otherwise, subtle body goes on. Whatever body we take, subtle body goes with us, and then it will have the impressions of so many previous lifetimes and so many attachments and entanglements. But devotional service engaged without attachment to the results will eventually, without any separate endeavor, separate effort, it will burn the subtle body away. It will melt the subtle body away. Just like the fire in stomach digests whatever we eat. So a pure devotee who's attached to the activities of devotional service, who always engages in the lotus feet in serving the lotus feet of the Lord, he also doesn't desire to become one with the Lord. He's always separate from the Lord because he wants to render service to the Lord. That is the highest bliss, not becoming one with the Lord. So he doesn't desire becoming one with the Lord either. And devotees, they always see the smiling form of the Lord. And the Lord's eyes are like rising sun. And they like to see various transcendental forms of the Lord. And they talk favorably about all these forms, and they talk favorably to the Lord himself. And by doing all these things, by hearing about him, by talking about him, a pure devotee loses all other consciousness. He doesn't want to hear about any mundane things. He doesn't want to get attracted to any other material bodies, and his senses are freed from other engagements. He gets absorbed in devotional service. So even though he's not working towards liberation, it naturally happens at this point. He's not entangled anymore because he's so absorbed in his Lord. He's not interested in anything material. Like the pleasure he derives, the pareshanubhava that Prabhupada refers in the purport, the pleasure he derives by serving the Lord is many, many more times, pleasing than any pleasure he may derive by the contact of sense objects with the senses. So he will be so hooked to serving his Lord and experiencing that transcendental pleasure that he doesn't go for anything lower than that. After we experiencing something higher, then we don't want to go for something lower. That's what happens. So he doesn't desire becoming one with the Lord. He doesn't desire getting all these 8 mystic perfections. Those are very attractive. I was telling the kids one day what the mystic perfections are, and they're like, oh, that's very nice. How can we get that, Mataji? So these are very attractive things. Kids speak it out and we just think, oh, that would be nice if I can do that. But a pure devotee, he's not interested in anything. Although they're at his fingertips, like he can exhibit certain mystic opulences, but he chooses not to exhibit. Prabhupada also had, but he chose not to exhibit those mystic opulences. So a devotee doesn't lose anything by engaging in devotional service. In fact, he gains something that he cannot gain from any other process. Having gained that, he doesn't go for anything else. And that's how he controls his mind. So I'll stop here and we'll open up for questions or comments. Any questions? I think somebody picked up their hand in between.
That was me earlier on, but I think you had kind of, right after I put my hand down, you kind of addressed the same subject in the 3 modes of material nature. So that's why I didn't ask my question anymore. But I was going to ask about the part in, I don't know the verse properly, so don't quote me. but there's a part where Krishna is telling Arjuna that all fruits of action are born out of the three modes of material nature, and that Arjuna should become transcendent in the three modes of material nature, because that is a way to detach himself from happiness and distress, and
Yes, Traigunya Vishaya Veda Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna Nirdvandvo Nitya Sattvasto Niryogakshema Atmavan. Yes. Yeah, you summarized it very well, the whole meaning.
Yeah, I think so. That's what I was gonna bring up, but I think you touched on it further, in the discussion. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. It's a nice comment.
I was having some reflections, Sundari, Radhika, Mataji.
Yes, Mataji. You can just call me Sundari Radhika.
Like we see the body deteriorating, among our relatives, friends, parents, and everything. But still, as we go through our everyday life, sometimes I feel like we amazingly think that this is all real.
Yeah. That's true, because we are always associated with such people, right? Mostly. So we keep thinking like that. Suppose if we are in the association of all the sages in Badrik Ashram,
right,
we probably wouldn't think like that.
Right. And momentarily we get these reflections when we see like somebody dying, or somebody is, we go to a funeral or something like that. But then later on, when we are again associating with, like you said, in a more materialistic world, it seems so real,
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree. I'm not beyond that, but I can just theoretically say that these are the potencies of Maya, Avarnatmika and Prakshepatmika. Like it slaps us, but then it also makes us forget that we were slapped before. So we continue to think that living in this material world happily will work. That's why we continue to do all these different things. Let me do that. Let me do this. I'll be happy by doing that. And then, it may not work out, and then we'll try something else. That's what is going on with every living entity in a different sphere. We may have more subtler satisfactions that we endeavor for, not really the gross sense gratification, but we have to get purified of those intentions as well. That's when we are completely detached.
I know, but sometimes like the mind is like the wind. It seems almost impossible.
Yes. When I read this Devahuti's question, how it began, I'm sick of this disturbance caused by the senses. I'm like, me too. Yeah.
And that's why I was joking when you said don't think of red, with red automatically. Maybe I should continue to say don't think of Krishna, and then maybe I will think of Krishna.
Yeah, that's a good way to trick the mind.
Trick the mind. I know. There is that verse, right? Smeram Bangitraya Parichitam Sachi Vistirna Drishtim, Om Shri Nastadara Kishalayam Ujvalam Chandrakena Govinda. If you do not want to be, forget about all of your, your material friends, your, relatives and everything. Don't look upon that, Krishna in that moonlight, in that Tribangi form, with this flute.
Yes, yes, very nice verse. The Sanskrit is also nice, Mataji.
Very beautiful. Yeah, Prabhupada quoted that often.
I only know the translation. When you said the Sanskrit, it was very nice.
Yeah, it's Srila Prabhupada quoted it on that picture of Murali Manohar. You know, he had that picture with him when he came from India.
Yeah, but that's what we want. We want that to happen to us, right? Look at you,
Yeah,
forget about all those.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you, Mataji. Wonderful comments. Someone else, I think, was trying to speak. Okay. So if no one else has any comments, thank you all very much for your association. Vancha kalpatarubhyasya kripasindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo
Namo namaha. Antakoti Vaishnavandaki Jai.